So my name is Major Iain Parsons. I'm a cardiology doctor and I'm doing PhD research into syncope in the military. Well, it's probably very much dependent on where it's happening, the syncope in itself. But having said that, we do put our people in positions where syncope is much more common, no matter where they are, so whether or not they're standing on parade or on an operational deployment. We are predisposing them to syncope, we're putting them in situations that precipitate syncope. And so the challenge is really being able to sort of manage that in an occupational setting. So firstly, it's being sure of the diagnosis and being safe for the patient so that you're happy for them to be able to continue in their role, because often, you know, we're sending these people out to go and fight in wars. And also to try and, mostly what my research has been looking at is to try and prevent syncope from happening in the first place, to try and buttress them physiologically before we actually send them out on a parade or send them out on operational deployment. And so some of the stuff that we're sort of looking into is giving them oral plasma volume expanders, so things to be able to increase the amount of water in the blood, which improves their orthostatic tolerance. But then that has huge ramifications for other aspects of the military. So we're hoping that, you know, some of these things may improve people's tolerance to thermal stress, may improve people's tolerance to heat stress, testing to heat acclimation, so they may be able to acclimate to heat better. It may also be an ergogenic aid as well, so they may improve their performance. So all these things sort of play into the physiology of managing our people with syncope. So there's sort of three facets that we're particularly interested in terms of syncope in the military, and these are the sort of map to the sort of stresses that we think we put our people under. So we make them exercise, we make them stand up for prolonged periods of time, and we also put them under heat stress because we send them to places where it's hot and we make them wear hot uniforms on hot days, and these all interplay with each other. So they often all combine in one. So we make them exercise, and then in the heat, we produce more heat by them exercising, and then we make them stand up for prolonged periods of time. So this is just part and parcel of being in the military and the role that you're doing as you are in the military. So the research we're doing is largely mapped to these things. And we've sort of specifically focused on each area in some respects. So if we take exercise as one, so there's a condition called post-exertional syncope. It's not that common, but if you were to sort of go to the London Marathon, you'll find that people will run for 2.5 hours, they'll finish the race, they'll feel great, and then they'll collapse. And that's a very common thing that you find. That appears to be mediated, at least in some part, by a histamine release based on some work done over in Oregon by a particular group. We've done a study which has tried to test that in an actual marathon race afterwards, to look at sort of histamine levels, and we looked at lots of other measures of preload and before and after, and body composition measures. So analysing that data now, we'll see what comes of it. So that's sort of the post-exertional syncope part. From the thermal stress part, so we know that when you acclimatise to heat, so you go to a hot place and you are exposed to heat, you exercise in the heat, your body makes certain physiological changes to be able to cope with that. And you take on much more water. Your tolerance to the heat is much better, so you can go out and work in the heat and seem to suffer it less. Just mentally, your tolerance to the heat is much better. Your heart rate drops, the amount of water in your blood increases, your sweat concentration becomes much less concentrated, and you sweat much more. So you produce a lot more sweat, but it's a lot less concentrated, so you hold on to that salt. Now, a lot of these things you can map to the sort of syncope population as well, which may have a beneficial effect. So it improves the cardiovascular stability, and you're taking on that extra plasma volume. So you're providing more of a buttress so that the body, the brain, doesn't hit that syncope reflex and cause people to faint. And so we've sort of done some work up in Leeds using heat acclimation. So heat acclimatization is something you do naturally when you fly off to Saudi Arabia or somewhere else. Heat acclimation is something you do controlled in a chamber so that you can sort of control all the variables. And we've shown, we think that there's some changes that the heart undergoes when you heat acclimate it to make it, which we think may have a beneficial effect in syncope. So we're looking to test that later on. And I suppose finally is that sort of orthostatic component where you sort of make people stand up prolonged periods of time, all the blood sinks down to their legs, that reservoir, and being able to support them in that. And part of that we think will also be improved by increasing the plasma volume, and certainly in the civilian populations you can often do that by giving them medications, but that is generally one of the challenges that we face as physicians in the military, in that giving people medications tends to affect their operational deployability, so it can affect their role and their role in the military, and occasionally that can affect career progression as well. So if you're a pilot and you're not able to fly, you can't be a pilot anymore, for instance, and you know, if you're a special forces soldier and you're reliant on medications, it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to do that role, because we don't know whether or not we're going to be able to resupply with those medications moving forward. And also it can be dangerous to take these medications in specific environments and things. So we have to absolutely understand the role of each individual soldier and what they do. So postural sway is an interesting phenomenon. So if you were to sort of tilt everyone, 100 people, you'd find that 10 or so of them who never fainted in their life would have a positive tilt test, sort of what we call a false positive. And if you give them orthostatic stress using something like lower body negative pressure, which sucks all the blood down into the legs, decreases the amount of volume going around the heart and causes people to faint, again, you find people who've never fainted before in their life, have been normal jogging along, never fainted, they have a very poor orthostatic tolerance, so they just don't cope with a tilt test. They just can't cope with it at all. So what does that mean? Well, there's some evidence to say that they have sort of learnt something called sway, whether that's something innate or something that they picked up or just found that works for them, we're not really sure. But essentially, if you just sort of look at them normally standing, they rock backwards and forwards like this. And that has the effect of sort of rhythmically compressing the calf muscles to push that blood back up the veins into the right side of the heart and around the system. And there's some evidence to suggest that is a way of being able to improve your orthostatic tolerance. And so we're looking at sort of a way of being able to measure that more scientifically using accelerometers and things. And where it's interesting for us in particular, so if you were to look down the lines of the ranks on large scale, big state ceremonial parades, for example, the Queen's Birthday Parade this Saturday, you will see, just by the effect of the cameras and the way they look down the ranks, not when you're looking at the parade from the front, but by the BBC being there, you'll see people swaying backwards and forwards like this, because they're wearing all that, the bear skin, the big tunic, the rifle, that's another 6 kilograms, and you'll see them sort of slowly rocking backwards and forwards like this. That's not something they've learnt to do, that's not something they've been told to do, but it's something that they do. And so we want to sort of understand that a little bit better, and that may be a sort of another physical counter manoeuvre that people can do, particularly on packed tube trains when you can't sort of sit there and crouch down or do the other physical counter manoeuvres that we all know there's good randomised control trial evidence that they work. And so that's something that's interesting for us as well, particularly for that state ceremonial aspect of being in the military.